Wait, do you want me to wait and look? The red light's on.
There we go. It's going. Go for it.
Yeah. So as I said, this was a slide pack information session that we did to. We primarily sent it out to the TCP leads, and obviously they would have circulated it to colleagues across the region and within their systems as well. So for them, I just wanted to put a bit of context to it, which related to the long-term plan's commitment to identify key workers, which is essentially on this first slide. And then, again, this is stuff that you probably are already aware of, but what I wanted to do was really start with what families had already shared. So I think it's also worth noting that throughout the whole key worker process, and getting even to this stage, there has been active parent care involvement in the consultation, in the discussions, and getting to this point. So it's not, we're not at a position now where we're now saying what do you think about the key worker role. It's been very much something that nationally we've wanted to make sure that you were in part, working alongside, in partnership with, absolutely hearing, both your voice and what, the voices of children and young people who are experiencing this are telling us. So again, it just says, families told us that, they wanted their families to feel safe and happy, listened to and informed. They wanted a reduction in their stress and uncertainty and an increase in stability, that they should have timely access to the right personalised, reasonably adjusted support, have a continuity of care, well-planned and managed transitions, that following CETRs, the recommendations should be implemented and that we have outcomes which are agreed. It's also worth me noting that I will share these slides. So if you're not able to kind of catch up or make notes, they will be shared as well, so you have it for information. So within the pilots specifically, ideally, prior to COVID, the plan was that we would have one pilot site per region. So there would have just been one for the Midlands, but unfortunately, due to COVID, this really impacted on that. However, there was a national commitment to continue with the key worker role. And so because of this, what we then consequently did was increase the pilot sites to 2 per region. So this could be a TCP by themselves, completing an expression of interest form. But ideally what we wanted was collaboration. So we wanted, 2 TCPs or a larger footprint to be able to implement this work, so that we could, demonstrate the effectiveness and what type of service they would want to offer. So the focus now is to try and have a wider footprint, but that there will be 2 pilot sites in the region. And I guess if you've got questions, you can always put them in the chat box and we can come back to those as well. So for the second point, prospective pilot sites, it's essential that they are able to demonstrate collaboration with partner organisations, engagement with parent carer forums involving young people, and clearly demonstrating that they're able to deliver their pilot plans, which are clear. So we know that COVID has had a significant impact on children, young people and families. And so that needs to be taken into account, not only for this current time, but for potential surges that we may have. The key worker role will proactively support and work with those who are at risk of being admitted into hospital, those who are also in hospital, and receiving appropriate personalised integrated support. So what we do know is that there is a national target of 90% for all areas to have a community CETR within the timescales. Within the Midlands, we're not achieving that target, and it's something that we are continuing to have discussions about to ensure that the majority, the 90% of children and young people, if not more, are able to have care, education and treatment reviews in the community, so that where possible we can avoid admission. And linked to that is the DSR, which is the Dynamic Support Register. So what we want to do is ensure that the Dynamic Support Register is effective, it's robust, they're able to identify children who are at risk or at risk of crisis at an earlier stage, so that we don't need to have a community CETR. We can provide the additional support in the community, supporting children and young people at home at an earlier stage. So in addition to that, the key worker role isn't about offering additionality. We're not asking you to, provide additional support to what already exists. We're not looking for existing roles to be covered either. We're wanting you to think about areas to think about how they can do things differently to make a change. So as I said, there are 2 pilot sites, and each pilot site will receive £250,000. So there is £500,000 per region, and that money is expected to be used between October 2020 and the end of March. But we also recognise that 6 months isn't a realistic timescale. It's not a very long time, but again, due to COVID, we were impacted because of that. So there is an expectation that the work will continue post March into April onwards, but that any successful area will be able to hit the ground running, essentially. So they will need to be able to provide their key working role, their dynamic support, have a lot of that stuff already in place, or be able to start the work at pace. Come 2021 into the new financial year, pilot sites will receive additional monies to help bolster and continue the work that's already commenced. But the amount that they will receive will be dependent on how big the actual pilot site is. So we will see how that progresses. At the moment, we don't know what the detailed funding plans will look like for the pilots and the early adopter sites, including investment models for 2021 into 2022. But we will, I'm sure, as time progresses, we'll know that. So the revised plans for the pilots due to COVID was that we knew that we had to increase the pilot sites. So they went from 7 to 14, again, across the whole country. And the focus was on the restoration and the development of the dynamic support registers. Metrics would need to be revised again because of the shorter timescale, the impact of COVID. Pilot sites would need to outline plans to support step down from key working. So what we don't want is the key worker to be the only person. The key worker role has to hand over back to the community team and to the care coordinator. The key worker functions and the competency framework supports recruitment from a wide range of professional backgrounds. So within that, what we were really clear about was that we didn't just want a designated profession to be involved, because we know that, potentially with the complexities of young people that were presenting to inpatient admissions, for example, that they would have a range of professionals involved. So rather than creating a person specification, what we wanted to do was create a function and competency framework that would allow areas to think about how this role would work, taking into account their own geography and their own demography. Pilot sites would also consider options for virtual working, and the importance of cross-system knowledge and working across and improved ways of working would also make a difference. Some of the risks would be that, there would be an increase in the numbers of children, young people and families in crisis that would need support. And so they would need to plan and prepare for that there would potentially be challenges for recruiting the workforce, that at the moment we know that there is potentially a reduced offer from services, including charity and voluntary sector. So how would they work with those sectors to provide additional support? That actually, due to COVID, where we may have wanted more face-to-face working, that it may not be possible. So they'd need to also think about virtual ways of working as well. That there would also be a risk of increased demand for key worker support and how they would manage that. And also, if we are having more than one system come together, how they're going to work and support potential breakdowns, because obviously it's about how these are sometimes these are relationships that are working together for the first time. So what we don't want is for there to be a breakdown of the collaborative relationship. This was taken from the competency framework, I think it was. So I just wanted to kind of capture this in the fact that it really is about the young person and the family at the centre of everything that relates to the key working role, and the things that surround it, including ensuring that there is effective communication, strong relationships, the ability for the key worker to challenge and influence, unblocking the system, achieving change, allowing for problem solving to take place on a multi-systemic level. So that would include the individual, the family, and the system. That we would also enable direct support, that there is a focus on the fact that we do need to ensure that our key workers have an understanding of and a decent knowledge base on law and rights, and understanding the systems, and personalisation. So the overarching objectives for the function of the role is that children and young people's lived experience will improve, so that they feel happy and safe, listened to, informed and involved in their care plans and support. Family and carers will feel reduced stress and uncertainty, and will feel more stable, listened to, informed and involved, that there will be an improvement in the timely access to personalised support. Assessment, care and support is integrated across education, health and social care, and also the voluntary and community services. And that there are well planned and well managed transitions. We know that children, young people can fall through the gaps during those key transition stages, and so that's another area that we want to really ensure doesn't occur. And then for improved quality of care, that we're able to reduce inequalities, that where CETRs do take place, that the recommendations are followed through, and that the outcomes are agreed with the young person and their family. So just as I'm approaching the end, in regards to time scales and the next steps, so the end of June, the expressions of interest process was launched, and during July, which is now, areas are feverishly working away and thinking about whether they want to become a pilot site, whether they want to work collaboratively with a different system. And so undertaking that work. August, we'll be notifying pilot sites of who's been awarded, and then in October the pilot sites will commence. So what's clear is that we need a shared vision for delivering the key worker function across the footprint, that it's essential that we have sign up for more partners, including parent carer forums or similar support groups. The local authority are actively engaged in this work as well, that we need co-development of the plans, full consideration of the system requirements and the risks, because we know that there are going to be risks, but what are areas going to do to mitigate against those risks, that the plans clearly show how the money will be used to expand the workforce and deliver the additional work that's required, that there are clear governance and leadership arrangements, and that there's a commitment to join a community of practice. Now, the community of practice is a forum within which all the pilot sites would meet together. They would discuss their own pilot sites, and they would share and learn from one another and what we've learned from that. So in the previous accelerator sites that you may or may not be aware of, is that we also had community of practice forums there, and actually it was a really good networking opportunity for areas to come together and to learn from one another, and also to have, for allowing them to think about what they might want to do in their areas. So as I said, I've mentioned the timescales, but in a little bit more detail, the deadline for the expression of interest applications is the 20th of July. There will be a review panel taking place on the 22nd of July, where the areas will present their expression of interest forms. August, we will notify areas of who's been successful. The pilot sites will commence in October. The plan is that at the beginning of 2021, I've put 2020, but it is 2021 into 2022, the pilot sites will continue, but we will also have early adopter sites. Now, the number isn't confirmed, but we're hoping it will be around 2 additional pilot sites per region. And then there'll be a wider rollout in 2022, 23, and then there will be a full rollout by 23, 24. So the expectation is that by 2023, 2024, not 2034, again, another typo, is that all areas across the country will have the key worker role. And I think that is it. So over to everybody else. Any questions? Have I stunned you all into silence? I hope not.
Tanita, Sarah.
Hi,
just
Sarah.
to say, I think I've got feedback. Can anybody? Does that sound all right to everybody else? Yeah. Okay. Just to say, I think that it's really important that forums start thinking about this now, even if they're not involved in the pilot, because as your last slide has just shown, you know, this is work that's going to come to every area. Absolutely. And you know, the pilots aren't going to say, you know, or at least I'm assuming in the way that NHS England have worked previously and from other projects I've been involved in, you know, the pilots will suggest and, you know, propose ways that this could be done, but that won't be imposed on any local area. And there'll be some, well, you know, as long as the function is delivered, there will be some flexibility in how it's delivered in each local area. So, you know, it's a really good opportunity for forums to start thinking now. And, you know, it's being on the pilot is a bit of a short time scale, isn't it? So actually those forums who aren't the pilot could start thinking about this with their community, talking about, you know, raising the profile of this role, talking to families about what they see as being important to them in their local area, in readiness for this work that is going to come our way. So, you know, I think it's really timely that we're all having this discussion now, and make sure we don't just see it just as those lucky few who get the pilot, but it's something that we all need to be thinking about.
Absolutely. And I think that, you know, completely agree with everything that you said. And I think there is, you know, for the areas, when we were having the discussions about the pilot sites before all the paperwork came out, I was saying to areas, you know, you might not feel that you're in a position to become a pilot site yet, but it's coming to you at some point in time, whether that's the early adopter sites or later on in the preceding years. So you, regardless, you need to think about what that would look like for your areas. So it's not a pilot site and then a never, it is coming. So absolutely agree that, you know, there needs to be the conversation taking place now, where irrespective of whether you're applying to be a pilot site or not. The other thing is that we have actively asked areas to consider, you know, you need to be engaged in conversations with your parent carer forums or your support groups, however it kind of functions in your area, so that you're actually and actively hearing their perspective now. And just going back to, I was just kind of semi-reading the chat as well. Absolutely, the term key worker is one that still doesn't sit well. So we've stuck with it because what we didn't want to do was kind of get distracted by the key worker name and not produce the paperwork and get the ball rolling. So, you know, if it feels that it needs to change in your local system, then as long as you're delivering the key requirements, then I don't really mind what you choose to consequently call it. Sally?
Yeah. Is there, well, will there, or is it up to each individual pilot site, a mechanism for reviewing how the work's progressing? Is there, do we need to feed back into something to say, well, this has worked well, or this hasn't worked well, so that feeds into the next pilots or adapters? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So successful pilot sites will be part of, as I think I mentioned earlier on, the community of practice. So those community of practice will have all 14 pilot sites within them. So it'll be like a forum within which all the pilot sites will gather together. They'll talk about what they're doing as individual pilots. They'll share, they'll learn, and feedback. There is also going to be a national evaluator who will tap into all of the pilot sites, so they'll capture the learning as things progress, so that we're capturing some live information, but also it will inform what the early adopter sites will look like as well.
Great, that's good.
Sarah?
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to share the experience because, as many of you will know from the presentation that I did with the Northeast to our region last year, that I was involved in one of the accelerator sites for transforming care and children and young people in the Northeast. And we used a community of practice approach. And I've got to say it was a really valuable approach, and the expectation was certainly for the accelerator sites, and what we would want to see with this is that the team that participates in those community of practice includes representatives from all the different teams that are working on the actual pilot. And so we had one of our health leads. There was always a parent carer forum representative, which was myself or Maureen Morris, who some of you might know. And then we were able to include different representatives from different pieces of work as that work progressed. But there was always a core representation from the sort of the pilot, the accelerator site steering group, which always included a parent carer. And I think that was really, really valuable. And I would suggest anybody who has a pilot, is part of the pilot scheme, make sure that parent carer voice is always in those discussions.
Absolutely agree. And I think, having been part of the community of practices as well, I think nationally what we acknowledged was that it was just such a valuable learning experience, which is why they want to repeat the same again, because there's some of that softer intelligence that you gather that you can't kind of grasp out of a slide. You kind of hear some of the detail that actually helps make a difference, and again it also allows other areas to hear what's going on, and there's, it is a good networking experience as well. So again, that's why we want to repeat the community of practice.
And I think from a national perspective, the national evaluator part of this and the community of practice forum will all be feeding into the national learning disability and autism work strands. So there will be national representation from parent carer forums who already sit on that group. We have 3 members of the NMPCF sit on that group for us, the Northwest representative, Yorkshire and Humber representative, and the East of England. So we have a way of making sure that we're getting the feedback coming back down the loop, so that we know where the national steer is going and what they're hearing and what they're feeling about what they're hearing. Forums will be getting that intelligence back again through that feedback mechanism. So it's important to note that. But I think from a local perspective, what the value of today's conversation really is for forums is understanding, partly, is this something that you want to put on the radar of your local area to say this is something we need to be, either as a pilot site opportunity we need to be talking about, or as a general theme of conversation, because we've got 2 years to be ready for this to be rolled out. So we need to start really thinking about the early stages and the softer implementation that we can do now that will create that corner of the market for a key worker role, which in theory a lot of areas may already have something that does very similar to this, but doesn't specifically focus on learning disability and autism per se, but needs to have that lens moving forward. So there's opportunity there for conversation. But I think also from the forum's perspective is understanding how much of an impact this has on our workloads and our capacities moving forward, because this isn't something that is just a health conversation. This is a local area conversation. This should be something that we're hearing about at strategic board level in the local authority and through the CCG feedback groups. we should be talking about this not just across the children's services, but looking at the outcomes and the impacts into the young adult services and making sure that there's a continuation of success. We should also be extremely mindful of the fact that this won't be focused in one conversation. As the forums who sit on pretty much everything, you guys are best placed to say this conversation should be happening across all of these different strands of work, and how do we tie all of that in? So it's understanding where you guys can be a key mechanism and a lever to start these conversations or to maintain these conversations in a sustainable way in your area. And I think as it moves on and it progresses and we know who the pilot sites are, and we can start developing like a regional plan around scheduling in when we're going to feed back to each other and when we can share that feedback more widely, we'll have a better understanding of what the reality of some of that learning is going to look like and how you can really take advantage of it. And I think, you know, as Sarah's pointed out previously in the conversations that we've had around the North East accelerator work that went on over the last few years, there is some massive potential here that doesn't necessarily need funding attached to it. It just needs creative thinking and working together and joint ventures. But if there's funding coming down the road in a couple of years' time, let's take advantage of these opportunities and have a really good think about what we can do locally. Has anybody got any questions? Because I'm conscious that we've got quite a few people on here who might be overwhelmed by all of this or might just not know what to ask. No question is a daft question. All questions are valid.
I was just wondering if any of the local areas have had any contact about this at all, or heard about it from, you know, their Transforming Care or LDA group, or if they're involved in any of those at the moment. Is it worth just going round and just gathering sort of initial thoughts?
Yeah.
Yes, I can start. So we've already started conversations in Worcestershire, and I'm speaking to Sally Ann Osborne on Monday, but I've already spoken to Steph Courts, so they're quite keen, and they want to explore it more and have more conversations. So we started the process, and I'm going to recommend that it goes to the Send Improvement Board, which is in 2 weeks' time. If I can't get it on the agenda, I'll put it on as AOB just to make sure that the board, and on the board you've got health, education, you know, head teachers, you've got the justice system, you've got a whole range of people. So we'll be able to get, well, we'll put it to the board that they're happy to support this project in Worcestershire anyway. Is that the sort of thing you wanted to hear?
Yeah, just useful to see if there's been any.
The timescales.
Sorry?
I guess it's just worth flagging the timescales again. So I think it's really good that you're going to bring it to your Send board, but that the expressions of interest have got to be submitted by the 20th of July.
Yeah, it won't hold us from doing that, but we still need to let them know that that's what we're doing. Yeah.
That's really positive, Sally.
Thank you.
You want to anybody else? Yeah.
Duncan Liddell, I'm with the Dudley PCF. We're kind of playing catch up a little bit, so we've just approached the CCG. We approached the local authority, who didn't know anything about it, so we're just kind of waiting for a strategic lead to make comment with the CCG, and hopefully we can bring it forward from there.
And that's great, I think, Duncan, that, you know, because if nothing else, this is an opportunity to start building relationships with people that we may not have had a conversation with before. So, you know, the best way to build a relationship is to actually do some work together, and that's the way you find out about each other. So, you know, it's a great opportunity. So hopefully that you'll get a positive response.
I'm hoping so. I mean, the local authority, I don't know if many of you know the kind of what's been happening in Dudley. There's been a few issues, so they're kind of concentrating on putting their own house in the order at the moment. So hopefully we can all move forward together.
Great.
Joe, anything going on in Birmingham? You're on mute, darling.
Always.
We've already done this once.
You all go.
Hi, I'm Jo from Birmingham. Right, so I didn't attend the webinar yesterday because I had another meeting. But I think our secretary went, and I'm not sure if Sabia did because we haven't managed to catch up yet. But she did forward an email this morning that one of the lead commissioners for autism and learning disability actually got in touch, saying that she is potentially interested in putting forward that expression of interest, and that she very much asked the question if the forum also wanted to be involved. So that's as far as we've got. So I haven't read all the way through the email, and I haven't caught up with Sabia as yet. So at some point today, I'll obviously speak back with her and obviously tell her that I'm on this as well, and then we'll have that chat to decide how we are going to go forward. Yeah, so that's us.
Yeah.
Cool. Debbie, anything going on in Herefordshire? Any conversation about it?
I'm sorry?
Well, I was just wondering if Debbie's got any comment for Herefordshire as well.
Oh, okay.
Although if she's got a crisis at home, she might have gone quiet. Max?
Hiya, yeah, we can update you if Debbie's not there. We have got a meeting, admittedly not very parent friendly, at 9 o'clock next week in the morning with a number of health and local authority people coming to work out what we can do. So that started off. We discussed it at our SEND strategy meeting last week, so it is very much on our agenda.
Can I just say that Hereford and Worcestershire is now a joint CCG, so that's why we both need to, and it does cover a huge patch, but would be really good. So that when we started the conversations, it was making sure that everyone's in Herefordshire and Worcester is together on it. So
Of course. I just that hadn't crossed my mind. It totally missed that entirely. I suppose from a Shropshire and a Telford and Wrekin perspective as well, we have briefly had a conversation with the DCO, I can't, whichever one she is. She's one of them, about whether or not it's something that we could do. And I know that there is interest from Telford and Wrekin's side from the local authority. However, in Shropshire, we have raised some legitimate concerns about the amount of time we've got to contribute to a pilot project, and that we would probably be more confident in just chipping in on the learning from a regional perspective and working on the regional stuff. And obviously we've got the benefit of I sit in Shropshire and also sit on the regional activity for NNPCF, so we have a slightly tighter link and would benefit from that anyway. So for us, there's conversation about it, but actually what it's done for us is it's kick-started a different conversation about where does this project fit in our longer term plans in responding to our written statement of action and developing our neurodevelopmental pathway and supporting our families in the bigger, wider wraparound support. And how do we learn, because we've got a very, very small cohort of families that hit that tier 4 kind of TCP cohort. That transforming care cohort in Shropshire is really quite small in comparison to everywhere else in the West Midlands. So we would find it very difficult to just focus one piece of work on that cohort of families alone. It would need to be broader for it to actually be of value and benefit to the area. So it's kicked off a really different conversation for us, which is exciting and timely, which is lovely. But for me, the crucial element to inform that is making sure that the learning and the regional conversations beyond the pilot sites are really robust and are very well tied into everything else that we're doing, so that we don't miss the opportunity to share that practice with areas that aren't pilot sites. And I'm also very mindful that this is across both the East and the West Midlands, so we will be getting that dynamic kind of diverse approach from what happens in the East versus what happens in the West. And as there is only 2 very small regions as part of the Midlands region as a whole, it's easier for us to come together and do these things together. So it will be very interesting to see what happens moving forward, I think. That was a long-winded way of saying that, wasn't it? Sorry. I'm great at keeping things succinct.
Telford's still on? I don't. If that was the
No,
only other.
Karen's just dropped off.
Karen to go. Right. Okay. So is that everybody?
Yep. Has anybody else got any other comments or questions they want to raise? We've got about 15 minutes left, but if we don't need that 15 minutes, I'm sure everybody would appreciate an extra 15 minutes for a cup of tea.
So, would it be possible to get an email of all the slides? I've battered my left hand, so I can't write any notes at the moment.
You're on mute now,
I'm on
Talita.
mute. It was my turn. It was my turn. Yeah, no, I am going to share the slides. One of the things, I think Sarah just asked a question in the chat about sharing it wider. So
Yeah.
I just want to confirm that. But other than that, yeah, I'll send them to Zara, and then if that's
Because I think
Zara, and
Yeah.
then distribute them.
quite an important role for forums to promote and support the wider community's understanding of this role. So I was involved in some of the earlier discussions about this role nationally, and you know there is quite some mixed views on it in where it should focus, what it should target, and you know it did come about because we know of the more extreme cases where things were really going wrong and young people were being ended up stuck in inappropriate placements, and the system just couldn't be unpicked, and there was nobody there doing that. And there's absolutely a role for that as well. But also there's that wider group, as Zara talked about, you know, of young people who don't quite hit that crisis threshold, but life is still not very good for them. And so I think it's about making sure that people understand that this role could benefit both. Absolutely. And that it is wider, and there's it's a really important investment in the LD and autism community. And just to clarify, just in case there is any misunderstanding, it is learning disabilities and or autism. Yeah. So it does apply to young people who are autism only. Yeah. Which is obviously a totally different cohort to those who might have learning disabilities or those who might have learning disability and autism. So it does apply to those young people who would be in mainstream school, but really struggling and going into crisis for different reasons. So this is about that group as well. So I think that's a really important message that we get out to our community, because, you know, sometimes these things come out and we end up talking about what these pilots aren't doing rather than what they are. And absolutely we need to raise, you know, awareness of gaps, etc. But we mustn't miss the opportunity to actually progress what we can as well.
Yeah. So, and I think this role is, again, a key opportunity. So if you do know there are gaps, you can seek to, you know, work towards resolving that. So although the focus on this current pilot site is those who are in inpatient settings, it doesn't exclude you from focusing on those young people who, you know, you might have your dynamic register might not be as robust as what it needs to be, or it is really good, but you still have high inpatient numbers. So it's not just, for me, it's not just about those young people who have got, you know, there are areas who have got high inpatient numbers. It's the whole pathway, the early help, the dynamic support register. Because if one area is really weak, then it has a ripple effect with others. So there may be areas who have low numbers, but, you know, that could be for varying other reasons. So there is a focus on ensuring that your dynamic support register is really robust and you are capturing those young people as well. So I guess it's just also worth adding that. And I guess the other thing that one of the areas had flagged to me was, I guess the kind of focus is on being, you know, up to 18 years old, but there is that scope to work up to 25 as well. So I guess it's, you know, what we don't want to do is cut young people off when, again, that's a significant transition age. So there is that scope to kind of go up to the 25 age group as well.
And I think that ties into the local pathways that goes beyond what is just funded as part of the pilot. It's how the pilots tie into the existing pathways, which will include your transition pathways, your young adults social care services, your young adults health services. It will all kind of interlink and slot together like a jigsaw puzzle. And for me, the key part about this is that although it's a health-led project, it's not a health project. It
Absolutely.
is a local area project.
Absolutely.
And it needs to have that buy-in and that commitment from absolutely everybody, from all the way down as low in the system as the early help kind of first point of contact telephone number, where people ring the council and go, I think I need help, but I don't know what help I need, all the way through to my child has been arrested for behaviours that are extreme and as a result is being held under the Mental Capacity Act. That is the range of extreme kind of diverse services that need to be involved in this process. So it is, and it is, again, it isn't just about local authority or CCG, it is also about how do we feed in the policing services, community-based services, voluntary sector services. All of that ties into the project as a whole, but won't necessarily be immediately impacted by the pilots in the very beginning, but the learning that comes out of it could be huge. It's got the potential to be really, really brilliant. It's also got the potential to not be really, really brilliant if we're not in there having these conversations and reminding people about the importance of all of these connections.
Which is why reviewing it is really important.
Absolutely.
Otherwise you'll miss out on those points, won't you, with what works well, what doesn't work well, because it's quite a lot of people that you're going to touch, aren't you? Even if you touch them lightly, or that service, it's going to have an impact in a lot of different ways. So it might highlight other areas that need looking at and improving, because doing this is highlighted. Yeah, look, it's quite exciting, really, isn't it?
It is.
I'm going to have to leave if that's possible, because my daughter's got her awards day, albeit live streaming. But thank you very much. Thanks for the presentation, and speak to you all soon. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Sally.
Okay, bye.
Okay, has anybody got any other questions, comments, thoughts? This has all been recorded, just as a reminder. So if anybody wants to share the presentation within your steering group with other members of your steering group, then we can make this available to everybody. I'll just have to double check that I've not captured any personal conversations at the beginning, which I don't think I did. But any final thoughts?
Just thank you, Tanita, for that. That was great.
Thank you for facilitating it as well. Hopefully this will be the first of many conversations that we have together across the region.
Fabulous. On that note, then, I'm going to say thank you very much, everybody, for your time. As I say, I will get the presentation that Tanita will share with us and the recording over to you all, so that you can share that internally with your steering groups. And if Tanita can get clarity on whether or not we can share that more widely, then we'll let you know at that point as well, if that can be shared more widely. Although if it can't for any reason at all, what I'm thinking is I might try and put together something from a regional perspective that just reflects on why is this valuable for us as forums to be mindful of, so that we can share that with our communities of why is this valuable for our time and our efforts, why is it important to you as a community, why do we need you to engage with us on what you want to see from this, and then maybe we can get that out to our communities instead and start drumming up interest and conversation around it.
I'll get back to you today, Zara, because I can't really see a reason why it can't be shared, because I shared it at a different forum previously, so it shouldn't be an issue.
And I think it's really similar to the version that was shared on the Contact webinar. Was it yesterday or the day before yesterday? Which, if it's extremely similar to that, then that's going to be in the public domain, because they're going to publish that on their website.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, if we can't get this version, I'll signpost you all to the version that was shared from Contact, although that's more of a national perspective than this regional perspective, which is slightly different, because we're really, really lucky that we've got Tanita, who's tremendously engaged and wants this to be a full co-productive experience, which the national picture, it looks at the national benefits, it doesn't necessarily look at the co-production in the same way. Okay, fab, brilliant. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
See you all. Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Cheers.